Hey, good morning, church. I hope that you had a good 2 weeks not being here, going to CAT meeting, although it was probably a little bit rainy some of the time. But the rain is good, right? I mean, the farmers are happy, and we definitely needed it, so my grass has never looked greener. So I will take the rain with the blessing that it brings. So this morning, what I'm about to do is I'm kind of going to go more to my literary nerd side, is what I like to call it. Some of you obviously know now that I'm a teacher and I teach English Lit, high school for the most part, and I've been doing that for a while. So when I come up with ideas for what I want to talk about, they generally tend towards that concept. Okay. So there are going to be parts of this that might be a bit more heavy in specific terminology. I'm going to try my best to make sure they're simplified and easy for you to understand. My intention today will be to explore the idea of the hero as humanity has conceived it, and then move to a comparison of what a hero should be in Christianity. So there's going to be two different sides, and hopefully you can bear through the first part till I get to the second part. So for me personally, I have really quite long been fascinated by how heroes are represented in literature. I love the older renditions of this image and things like the Odyssey and Arthurian legend and myths. Those have always been kind of my wheelhouse, if you want to call it that. But my understanding of the hero and who he or she is has changed a lot as I've moved through life, and the importance of who the hero is actually changed quite a bit when I heard a talk by Ty Gibson, who's with Light Bearers. He discussed the idea of the hero in terms of salvation, and I thought it was really interesting, and some of my talk and the concepts that I'm going to use are going to be from that particular idea. So when we look at the idea of hero, that's a word that most of us should be familiar with at this point, I think. So when we think of this word, we usually automatically fill it with ideas that we ourselves or maybe society has presented us with. So I'm going to ask for a little bit of audience participation here. And what are words that you think of when you hear the term hero? You can just yell them out and hopefully not be shy, like some of my students are sometimes. Brave? Yes, absolutely. Anything else? Yeah. Superhero? Yeah. Courageous? Champion. And you know what's good about that is that all of those terms apply. They're all things that we use when we think of a hero. So when you look at the idea of heroes and why they're important to us in society, why is it that we have such a strong fascination with this concept? Well, I think that it's partly because they are willing to perform brave deeds, selfless instinct. They want to preserve life over their own, right? It's this idea of being able to restore faith in humanity when sometimes it's very easy for us to maybe give up on the idea of humanity. But it also creates awe and inspiration in people. Like if you're watching somebody run into a burning building or go into water or things that you wouldn't normally do and they're doing it without hesitation, you're going to be impressed with that, I think. I think we all feel interested in this idea of selfless deeds. We look up to these people. So when we look at people in our past that have had tremendous impact on our society, I would think of people like Harriet Tubman or Rosa Parks, or people that have created a world that is good for us now, but was very challenging for them at the time. They went through a lot of difficulty to get the civil rights and the idea of racial prejudice and things like that were so prevalent in their time to a place where we can actually be free to live life a little bit differently today. But there's also the idea of people like Mother Teresa and Gandhi and them sacrificing of themselves for equal rights, for people to have what they needed, for civil liberty. But we also know that they changed the political landscapes of their time. If people are willing to do these things We know that they are impressive in their capacity for sacrifice when it's needed. We have these people in our lives for a reason. But the important thing to remember too is that while they are in real life, they have also transcended that spot into literature as well. This persona that's been created has found itself in the pages of literature since literature has been created, and it's woven into the big screen in movies and TV shows countless times over. There have been philosophers that have talked about this topic, and writers who have tackled the question of what makes a hero and why humanity is so gripped with that concept. So when we look at the hero in literature, I'm going to focus on one philosopher today. So this is Joseph Campbell. He is, as far as I'm aware, he's not a Christian. He's just somebody who took time to look at this figure and say, hey, what am I noticing about this in literature and why is it so interesting? Okay, so he spent a great deal of time analyzing myths and their importance in our society. He looked at those stories and he came to actually one fascinating, interesting conclusion, that the idea of the hero is largely the same in every story, in every culture, in every place around the world. So that's why this book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, this is what was born out of. This is something I studied in university. He came up with an outline, I guess, of the hero's journey, and there's 12 steps, and he suggests that all of these stories follow these 12 steps in some variation, depending on what a hero is going through. So there is a quote that he came up with. It's a little bit wordy, if you want to call it that, but he says, "From what profundity of the mind does it derive? Why is mythology everywhere the same beneath its very varieties of costume? And what does it teach?" So profundity is a kind of big word. It basically just means from what ideas or concepts in the mind does this idea come from, right? So it's just that idea of intelligent thought or deep thought that people talk about. So Campbell wants to understand this creation of the hero in stories that can't possibly be achieved through collaboration. Nobody came together and came up with these ideas. They come from every culture. They come from a time when social media did not exist. And yet the hero is always the same, and the journey they take is similar. So from this questioning, Campbell created the idea of the archetype, our archetypal hero. So an archetype, in literature anyways, is a set concept that a character has to fit into. They have to perform those actions, right? So it's kind of like the villain or the jock or the cheerleader or these people that you see in stories that in general perform the same basic functions, okay? So for the hero anyways, he decided that there's 12 steps. Each one is fulfilled in various ways, like I've said, and I'm not going to go into every single step because that would be a lecture all on its own. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to highlight a couple of ones that I think might be a little confusing or different. I don't know, depends on how you look at it. The first one is in step 5, crossing the first threshold. That means that the hero is now leaving their familiar world for a more dangerous task that they've been given to do, okay? But the idea of resurrection, and this is important, so resurrection doesn't mean our concept of resurrection. It's the idea of they are now facing the final climax of their journey. They have to face the villain for the very last time. And if they don't succeed here, then the world that they know will be forever changed, okay? They have to sacrifice, even if it means themselves, to make sure this doesn't happen, all right? So what I've tried to do is I've put heroes into broad categories, the different kinds that we see in our society. So mythologically based heroes, you're going to see, like, that's the Odyssey and Lord of the Rings and Hercules and Beowulf. All of those kinds of people fit into that particular idea. We have the superhero category, which is probably the most prominent one in society right now, the one that people see the most often. So that's Superman, Spider-Man, Batman, all these different people. And then intertextual heroes, I just mean people that have changed in different types of literature. They've been in lots of stories, they've been in lots of short stories, novels, even on screen. They've changed throughout that time. So that's like James Bond and Sherlock Holmes, King Arthur, Robin Hood, Nancy Drew, those kinds of people. Okay, and then of course the last category, the one that I will come back to, is strong biblical heroes, the ones that we see in that type of literature, and even though those are real stories, they still sometimes fit those categories in interesting ways. But Moses, David, Abraham, Jesus, these are all people that we recognize from the Bible that have strong heroic qualities. And Jesus will be the one, of course, that I focus on in the second half of this talk, okay? So what we're going to do today is I'm going to take one hero, and it's going to be a superhero just because that is the most relevant to today's society, I think, and the one that we see the most often in literature and media. So we're going to look at Superman. Okay, so we can do this comparison. Now, Superman, when I use the title, a Christ-like figure, I'm simply suggesting that as a literary figure, Superman has qualities that are similar to who Jesus is, and their comparisons that we're going to make. Not, how do I say this? Not like I'm saying that Superman is Jesus, obviously, but he's the closest representation to that we have in literature right now. So this is who I'm choosing to focus on. So in this case, superheroes and who they are is an important consideration that we should look at. This is an industry that has taken our society by storm. Okay, before COVID, yearly, those were movies that were grossing over $10 billion a year. Okay, so they were doing very well. They were important and pervasive in our society. They were everywhere. And they still continue to be today. So we are reaching $5 billion now this year so far. So we're gaining traction again in this idea of superheroes. Now, Superman is the one that I picked partly because of the strong Christ-like figure that's in several articles that I've looked at. But the bigger interesting idea is that he's also the first superhero. He was the first one that was ever made, okay? And he was conceived in the minds of two Jewish teenagers, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, in 1938. Okay, so this is coming off the heels of World War I. And both of the boys wanted a hero that would inspire themselves, but also their country. And so Superman was born. But Superman has symbols that relate back to the Jewish faith that they grew up with. That would be common, especially when you're creating something from what you know. So these are just comparisons that I'm making and that other people have made. It's important to note here that these two boys never said that these things existed. They are ones that were made after the fact when Superman had been around for a while. Okay, so his name is Kal-El. That's his not human name. And the L in the name means God in Hebrew when you look at that language. When Superman comes to Earth in his origin story, he does so in a vessel that's shaped like a boat-like basket, somewhat reminiscent of Moses fleeing death in a basket, if you wanted to go there, okay? However, these ideas have taken hold in society's imagination, whether those two first authors meant to do this or not. And when movies started to be made from the comic books, the idea of Superman as a Christ-like figure became a much stronger thing. In 1978, when Superman the movie came out, one of the lines from that movie is a fairly blatant comparison. Superman's father says to him, "They can be a great people, Kal-El, they wish to be. They only lack the light to show the way. For this reason, above all, their capacity for good, I have sent them you, my only son." So there is that direct idea of being his only son, just like when Jesus comes down to earth, God says the same thing to him, okay? There's also this idea that Superman, in several depictions after this, when he dies, he does so in a cross-like manner. He spreads his arms out, and he looks like he's on a cross. There's also the idea of Superman being resurrected in one of the movies. So these comparisons, or these ideas of him being like Jesus, become more pervasive as we move through the movies and when they come out. In the most recent rendition that just came out, interestingly enough, Superman in that particular one is represented as a alien, because he is one, if you want to call him that, who came to Earth to save people, but part of the message that his parents had was forgotten, and it was repaired in this movie, and they told him to be a dictator on Earth and to do whatever he had to rule over it. So this was a strong deviation from what Superman had been in all of his movies. And he couldn't reconcile this idea. And so he chooses to embrace his humanity, the side that loves people and wants to do good, instead of what his parents from this other planet suggested to him. Okay, so why talk about Superman? Why the comparison? Why make a human-created character out to be like Jesus? Well, society has always been somewhat obsessed with understanding the need of a savior and what that looks like. And our literary renditions of heroes are flawed. And this is what we need to understand. The human mind has created heroes that it understands. And so that's how literature has portrayed them. When watching a sermon from Ty Gibson, the same talk that I referenced before, he used a term that I'm going to discuss here. Okay, so, I forgot a slide. I'll just let you quickly see the comparisons between the two. That was supposed to be what was up there before. So, what it is, the term that we're going to use is redemptive violence. Okay, this is a term that suggests that in order for us to have salvation from issues, we have to fight to get it. Okay, so that's an important thing to note. He calls our understanding of sacrifice and redemption the myth of redemptive violence. Okay, so when I say that the journey is called a monomyth, when I say monomyth, I mean it's one journey. It's one big journey that has several small parts. That's why that term is there. But the term redemptive violence was coined by Walter Winks, who was a theorist who suggested or maintained that people need to have might or force to get what they want. So he says, violence saves. War brings peace. Might makes right. Okay? In order to make sense of the hero and what they're supposed to be, we have used our sinful understanding of what that is. We have to meet force with force. And that can be problematic. All these heroes, all of the ones in literature, Superman included, have to use violence to win in some form or another. Okay? If you ever watched any of the many movies made about superheroes, you will almost always see damaged cities, broken villains, and a disturbing amount of force that was used to make things better. And yet at the same time, the problem about that is that we adore that image. And subconsciously, whether we realize it or not, when we watch something like that, do we not cheer for the hero of the story? Do we not want them to do good, to make things right? We think it's impressive. Yet, they are not really that much better than the average guy, because they're using the same things that we use to make sure that we win. They just have more power to do so. So they're using it to make sure that they get the right outcome. And that is, in popular culture, that is what we have been taught. That might indeed makes right. Okay, so when we cheer and we think it's great that the hero wins and saves the day, what is the cost to us as society? What are the ramifications of what the human mind is creating? Do we see any problems with it? And the really interesting thing is that even religion is starting to accept that ideal. Okay, so if you've had it since the beginning of organized religion, the idea of holy wars. You have increasing calls from Christian nationalism today that we need to make sure that we need to protect the ideals of the Bible, and if we have to fight to do it, that's what we need to do. These groups and ideas that we have learned from society effectively militarize the Bible and make it something that we have to fight for. And yet at the same time, there is a paradox that exists here. And as Christ followers, I think we need to be aware of it, and I think we be ready to talk about it. When you look at Jesus in the Bible, He is the exact opposite of every rendition of the hero created in popular culture. Even Roy Schwartz, who was the author of the article that outlined Superman's transformation as the Christ-like figure, he suggests that Superman is an action hero, not a martyred Lamb of God, which is the inherent paradox in making him a Christ figure. Jesus is the only hero that we have in any written literature that rejects the paradigm of redemptive violence. He offers redemptive love instead. And Jesus' hero journey, while perhaps vaguely able to follow parts of the path that Campbell sent out, is so radically different that it defies categorization. It defies the ability to set out any terminology that humanity has created. He's not there in that, and his message is vastly different to the one that's offered. So when we look at some of the verses that work for who Jesus is, you'll see the difference, I think. You have this idea from Matthew 26:6, yet it shall be not so among you, but whoever desires to become great among you, let him be your servant. Be a servant. Be somebody who's completely opposite of showing power and authority to others. 1 Corinthians 1:18 says, the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. But to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. The point is that power to society is vastly different than what we define it as in our own understanding of it. And so we're not ready for it all the time. And society is very good at rejecting the concept of Jesus because he's merciful and he's humble and he's so opposite of what we expect a hero to be. And 1 Corinthians 1:23-24 says, we preach Christ crucified, to the Jews a stumbling block and to the Greeks foolishness, but to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. So when you are looking at Jesus as the hero, hopefully, of your life, there is a different understanding of how you should act in your life and the things that matter. So when we look at this, Jesus offers a reality that is almost foreign to society. He is the other in literature, or the thing outside of the popular concepts. He steps over here, but he is the thing that matters the most. The other part that we should understand as well is that, described as a lamb on a cross, he died for all of us without lifting a finger. Like, he did not come to destroy like a lot of the heroes that we have in literature do. Infinite power and possibility lies within him, but unlike Superman or any other hero, he doesn't use it to take out the bad guys or lay waste to civilizations. Jesus is the hero that stops the cycle of violence and basically asks all of us to give each other a big hug instead. Can you imagine if we all did that? What would it look like if we all practiced love instead of violence? The world would be a very different place. The news probably wouldn't be as depressing as it is right now. I can guarantee you that the answer to how you live your life massively depends on who the hero of your story is. Who are you choosing to follow? The reason I picked John 18:12 that says, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, will have the light of life, is that he is the hero that gives you the light of life. And if we choose to follow him, if we choose to see him as the hero that we follow, then all of mankind would never use violence. We would be great. We would be a utopia. And it would be a pretty awesome place to be. But the one who willingly died on the cross would do so again, just for the love of you as an individual. It's not the same as the hero that fights against the call and struggles against the massive responsibility in front of them and tries to get out of it sometimes and doesn't want to be there, and it makes flawed mistakes throughout the journey. Jesus is the radical hero, and we are called to be the same. And a world that increasingly calls for violence is the answer to all of our problems. So again, I have to ask, as you look at this, who is the hero of your journey? Who is walking with you? And I pray that you can answer that it is the hero with the one face instead of 1,000. The hero whose message of love and sacrifices changes the world in the best possible way. And if it's not that answer, I hope that you can read the Bible and see a story that is from the beginning to the end, and it never changes, and is a timeless, unique version of a hero that is offered to you, and the only one that should matter in your life as you go forward. Yeah, so I'm done. Thank you.